In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen. On October 15th, we celebrate the Hieromartyr Lucian. He was martyred just at the beginning of the 4th century. And there's some edifying things about his life, but I want to cut to the two most important things that really shake me. And that's why I read the Lives of the Saints, because it shakes me up. And I want to follow them, not in exactitude necessarily, as far as the circumstances of their life, but according to their heart. So, he was in an area where the emperor was persecuting people because of Christianity, and he was causing many people to be strong in the faith. There were a lot of people that are apostasizing. Remember, for everybody in the book of the Synaxarion or the Menologian, there are 100 people who apostatize, because most people are going to apostatize, because that way is broad, and because they're afraid. And perhaps you and I would be afraid. So let's not be so quick to judge, but let's do something so that we'll be ready. So even the look of his face, which was shining with the Holy Spirit, would cause people to reconsider their apostasy and to be strong. And that really got me. I'm a priest. I talk to people about things all the time. And I try to live them, and to some extent I live them. I certainly live them more than some of the people I'm teaching, but could I say that I'm really apparently a vessel of the Holy Spirit? I mean, I am, but do I look like one? Do I act like one? Does the mere vision of my face cause people to say, I feel better, I can believe now? I don't think so. But it should be that way. It should be that way. So we have a long ways to go as Christians, because we're not like St. Lucian. Maybe some of us are. But I'm not like him, unfortunately. And we should emulate him. We should be having an inner life so that when people look at us, they see Christ. I can talk about Christ. I can teach about Christ. I can pray to Christ. I can teach other people about Christ in some way. But can I really be Christ for people? Well, I think by the grace of God sometimes that happens, but not because of my virtues. Because God says, well, I need this donkey to do something. And so the donkey does something. So that's one thing about St. Lucian's life that I think is pretty amazing, that he enlightened people merely by his presence, by the peace of God which was in his heart, and his fearlessness. He was unafraid of torture. And of course, he eventually got found out, and he eventually got arrested and thrown in a dungeon, and a theophany came about, and he wanted to celebrate liturgy. Some stuff had been smuggled into the prison, and that's possible because in those days you pretty much didn't eat if people didn't bring stuff to you in prison. Nowadays you have to have all kinds of permission to go to prison, and not so long ago you had to wear a mask, and in some prisons you had to prove you were vaccinated, which meant I didn't have a chance to get in there. But in the old ancient prisons, people came to the ancient prisons all the time to attend to their loved ones. So they smuggled in some wine and some bread, and he served the liturgy. Well, he didn't have an altar. He didn't have an antimus. What did he do? He served the liturgy on his chest. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? That's thinking outside of the box, shall we say. Pretty amazing. So may we have that kind of faith that St. Lucian had. Now, what does it have to do with you and me? Perhaps you're a woman or a child. You're not a priest. You're a layman. What does this have to do with you? There's no persecution openly because of paganism. Not openly, not yet. You're not in prison. Or if you are in prison, it's a different kind of prison. And if you want to have the liturgy celebrated, you go to church. So what does this have to do with you? Well, we must live the inner life. And we should feel rebuked by a person like Lucian that we don't live the inner life. May God forgive us for this. That's why we have to do our prostrations. That's why we have to love our enemy. That's why we have to come to church more often. That's why we need to commune and confess more often. We need to do all those things because we should have the light of Christ in our face. People should look at our face and say, something about them is different. Something's different about him or her. And as far as St. Lucian celebrating the liturgies on his chest, because of course our tradition is to celebrate the liturgies on anantimens, which always has the relics of a martyr, not just a saint, but of a martyr. Well, he knew he was going to be martyred, so he kind of did it by anticipation. And I'll tell you, if there was a woman in a prison waiting to be martyred, and I were a priest, I'd serve the liturgy on her chest. absolutely, because she's going to be martyred too. It's not a man-woman thing. Obviously, only a man can be a priest, but God recognizes grace in anyone. You can read the life of St. Mary of Egypt, you can figure that out. That actually Zosimus wanted to take a blessing from Mary of Egypt, and eventually, out of obedience, he prevailed on her to give him her blessing as a laywoman. So may God help us to have that kind of faith that St. Lucian had, that we're not afraid of persecution. It's happening, it's coming. It's going to happen in a slow way. It's going to happen in a kind of a more, shall we say, to coin a political phrase, kindler, gentler way. But there's not going to be anything kind or gentle about it. It's just not going to be openly bloody. And do we have the courage? Do we have the courage? Well, we won't have the courage unless we lead an inner life. So let's, you and I, decide that we're going to lead an inner life. Pray a little bit more. Pray a lot more, huh? And fast correctly. Live the Christian life. And struggle. And ask great martyrs like Lucian to intercede for our poor selves. Because we're weak, and perhaps we would fall. Perhaps we'll fall even at a little pebble in our path, much less some gigantic persecution. May God help us. We need to live the inner life. We need to lead the inner life right now. Because times are not getting better. They're getting worse. But God is with us. Understand, O you nations, and be vanquished. God is with us.